When we think of Gulliver's travels, many of us picture a children's adventure story, filled with tiny people and giant landscapes. But Jonathan Swift, who published the book in 1726, had no intention of writing a fairy tale. He wrote a biting, often uncomfortable satire designed to vex the world rather than entertain it. At its heart, the book is a study of perspective. It uses shifts in physical scale and social order to strip away the dignity of human politics and civilization, forcing us to look at ourselves from the outside. Our story follows Lemuel Gulliver, a man who begins his journey as a practical, somewhat naive ship's surgeon. He is a man of science and observation, which makes him the perfect vessel for Swift's social critiques. Gulliver's first voyage takes him to Lilliput, a land where the inhabitants are only about 6 inches tall. To the Lilliputians, Gulliver is a mountain of flesh, a colossal being that they initially view with a mixture of terror and intense curiosity. At first, Gulliver finds himself in a position of immense power. He is a useful giant. He helps the Lilliputians by transporting their supplies and providing a defense against their neighbors, the people of the island of Blefuscu. But as we see throughout the book, being a giant doesn't necessarily mean Gulliver is in control. He quickly becomes entangled in the absurd and petty politics of the Lilliputian court. The Lilliputians are divided by trivialities. They engage in absurd disputes over the most minuscule details, mirroring the religious and political factionalism that plagued England during Swift's time. Gulliver finds himself caught between these factions, and his refusal to take a side eventually leads to his downfall. When the Emperor of Lilliput commands Gulliver to help enslave the people of Blefuscu, Gulliver refuses. He cannot bring himself to be an instrument of tyranny. This act of conscience is treated as high treason. The Lilliputian court, led by the calculating Lord High Treasurer Flimnap, moves against him with terrifying efficiency. They don't just want him gone, they want him punished in a way that is both spectacular and cruel. The proposed sentence is to have Gulliver's eyes put out with arrows and then leave him to starve to death. It is a moment where the scale of the people is small, but the cruelty of their nature is massive. Gulliver manages to escape to Blefuscu, where the Emperor offers him protection. But Gulliver realizes he is nothing more than a political pawn in a game he no longer wishes to play. He builds a makeshift boat, repairs it with the help of the Blefuscudians, and eventually makes his way back to England. He returns home a wealthy man, having sold exotic livestock from his travels, but the peace of domestic life doesn't last. His restless spirit, or perhaps a growing disillusionment with his own kind, drives him back to the sea. His second voyage takes him to Brobdingnag, where the scale is reversed. Here, Gulliver is the tiny one. He is captured by a giant farmer and becomes a living curiosity. This part of the journey is a stark contrast to Lilliput. In Lilliput, Gulliver was a godlike figure, but in Brobdingnag he is reduced to a toy, a spectacle, or a pest. He is cared for by the farmer's daughter, Glumdalclitch. She is a vital character because she provides the only genuine kindness Gulliver experiences in this land. She acts as his protector and teacher, helping him navigate a world where a common house cat is a monster and a single rat is a beast. Without her, Gulliver would likely have been crushed or eaten long before he could adapt. Eventually, the farmer sells Gulliver to the Queen of Brobdingnag. At court, the humiliation becomes more psychological. He is treated as a freak of nature, a tiny creature meant for the amusement of the giants. He endures indignities that strip away his sense of self-being, dropped into a bowl of cream or being snatched up by a monkey. Yet, it is during his time at court that the book's most profound social critique occurs. Gulliver attempts to defend the glory of England. He speaks proudly of its government, its laws, and its social structures, trying to convince the giants that his people are a grand and sophisticated race. But the King of Brobdingnag views Gulliver's descriptions through a lens of massive, objective scale. To the king, the politics and wars of England look like the frantic, violent squabbles of insects. He looks at the history of human warfare and the greed of kings, and concludes that the English are nothing more than a pernicious race of little odious vermin. There is a famous moment where Gulliver tries to introduce the concept of gunpowder to the king, thinking he is offering a great technological advancement. The king is horrified. To the giants, the idea of a device that can kill thousands of people instantly is not progress, it is a barbaric and senseless madness. This highlights one of Swift's central themes, the gap between our technological advancement and our moral development. We have learned how to destroy, but we haven't learned how to live. Gulliver's escape from Brobdingnag is not a grand triumph of wit or strength, it is an accident of nature. While travelling near the coast, a giant eagle snatches up his travelling box, thinking it is a piece of prey. The bird engages in a fight with other birds and drops the box into the ocean. Gulliver survives only because his box is airtight and buoyant. He is eventually rescued by an English ship and returns home, but his appetite for exploration remains. However, as Gulliver continues to travel, the satire shifts from physical scale to intellectual and moral failure. His third voyage takes him to Laputa, a flying island inhabited by impractical intellectuals. These people are so consumed by abstract mathematics, astronomy, and music that they've completely lost touch with reality. They can calculate the movement of the stars with pinpoint accuracy, but they can't build a straight wall or sew a garment that actually fits a human body. It's Swift's way of mocking the Enlightenment's obsession with theoretical knowledge when it's divorced from practical human needs and common sense. But the final, and most devastating, journey is the fourth, the land of the Houyhnhnmans. Here, the natural order is completely flipped. The Houyhnhnmans are a race of rational, intelligent horses who live in a society based on reason, honesty, and peace. Living alongside them are the Yahoos, savage, filthy, human-like creatures who are driven by greed, violence, and instinct. At first, Gulliver is relieved to find a society of pure reason. He admires the Houyhnhnmans and tries to emulate their rationality. But the horror sets in when he realizes that he is not a peer to the horses. He is, in fact, a Yahoo. He looks at the Yahoos and sees all the worst traits of humanity, the cruelty, the filth, the irrationality, and realizes that these aren't just savage creatures, they are a mirror of the human race. This realization breaks him. By the time he is forced to leave the land of the Houyhnhnmans, Gulliver no longer views himself as a proud Englishman or a man of science. He views himself as a Yahoo who has been granted a glimpse of true rationality. When Gulliver finally returns to England for the last time, the psychological impact is total. He is no longer just feeling alienated or claustrophobic. He is genuinely disgusted by the human race. He cannot bear the smell of his own family. He cannot stand the sight of his wife and children because he sees them as Yahoos. He becomes a complete recluse, avoiding human society entirely. In a heartbreaking and absurd conclusion, he spends several hours every day in his stables, speaking with the horses, preferring the company of animals to the odious vermin of humanity. When we look at the structure of the book, we see how Swift uses a progression of perspectives to dismantle the human ego. In Lilliput, our political disputes are shown to be tiny and ridiculous. In Brobdingnag, our grandest achievements and most violent impulses are seen as the mindless twitching of vermin. In Laputa, our intellectual pride is revealed as useless abstraction. And finally, in the land of the Houyhnhnms, our very nature is stripped of its dignity. The book is a study in dehumanization. In Lilliput, Gulliver is a tool to be used and then discarded. In Brobdingnag, he is a curiosity to be stared at and laughed over. In the end, he is a specimen of a failed species. He is never truly a peer to the people or horses he meets. He is always an outsider. This leads us to the question of why Gulliver is so unhappy by the end. It isn't just that he has seen too much, it's that he has lost the ability to believe in the inherent dignity of human institutions. If a king's greatest achievement is just a more efficient way to kill, and if a nation's glory is just a collection of petty squabbles, and if our reason is just a mask for Yahoo-like greed, then what is left? The book leaves us with a sense of profound cynicism. Some critics argue that Swift's work is excessively misanthropic, that he simply hates humanity and wants to show that we are all inherently bad. But it might be more accurate to say that he is terrified of our potential for irrationality. He uses these fantastical settings to hold up a mirror to the reader, asking if we are truly the rational, sophisticated creatures we believe ourselves to be, or if we are just very small, very loud, and very violent creatures living in a world of our own making. As Gulliver spends his final years in the company of his horses, he is a man who has travelled to the edges of the known world and seen the extremes of existence, only to find that he can no longer find a home in the centre. He is a man who has lost his sense of proportion, left to navigate a world that feels too small and too savage to contain the complexity of his disillusionment. In the end, Gulliver's Travels is not just a story about a man who travels to strange lands. It is a story about the impossibility of ever truly seeing the world clearly, because our own perspective is always shaped by the scale of our own limitations. We are all, in some sense, trying to find our place in a world that is either too large to grasp or too small to matter.